It was fun while it lasted. No news poll. No polls. Well, guess what's just happened in the past couple of minutes? Our first poll of the next electoral cycle. But before we call it a poll, let's just call it a survey for obvious reasons. But this one will be one that, the Prime Minister will be very happy with, because guess what? It reflects not just that they would have won an election if it was held last weekend, they would have won by an even bigger margin. The news poll that has just dropped is 53-47 in favour of the coalition. There is a some 11-point lead over Labor when it comes to primary vote, which is pretty amazing. I'll have to double check whether that is actually the case or not. But overall, as for the Greens, well, the Greens are sitting exactly where they were. Everyone else sitting basically where they were. One Nation sitting at about 3%. The approval rating of Scott Morrison is up. But most importantly, to tell you what happened at the last election, at the federal election it was 51.5 to 48.5. It is now 53 to 47. So Scott Morrison, if he wants to call a snap election, don't do it. But if he did, the polls are at least a little better this time around. Oh, Campbell Newman, it was so good, wasn't it? About 2 months not having to talk about one of these freaking things. But they're back. Like cockroaches, you can't kill off opinion polls.
You can't, you'd think they could save a few pennies for a few more months, couldn't you? And yeah, please, I agree with you. No snap elections at all, thank you. Yeah. But look, it's not surprising, really. That's a result. I think the vibe out of Canberra has been extremely positive for the coalition. The PM getting on with the job, it's been great to see it. It's been a fantastic interlude compared to what we've seen in the last, sort of 7 or 8 years.
Well, also, not that we need to worry about any of this garbage, but it, of course, also means reset back to zero now. It's not 50, 60, 73, 6 years in a row. They not only just won an election, they've won their first news poll. The wins keep on coming. Scomentum is what we like to call it here, Adam Giles, and that's when you're winning, but nobody's watching. But it is pretty obvious. The sense of the country is that the government has only got stronger since the day when the Quiet Australians did exactly what we hoped they would do.
Yep.
And that is the case, isn't it?
Well, that's right. I think we coined the phrase "scomentum" on this show.
Correct.
Paul. Maybe we need to try and enter it into a dictionary somewhere. The day that Scott Morrison saved the nation and got rid of another bill, that being Bill Shorten. But the interesting thing in these polls, which I'll have a read of in the Australian tomorrow, will be what the numbers are for preferred leader. What are the positives and negatives for each leader? Because I'd be very interested to see how Anthony Albanese's going, and also be keen to see what the undecideds are, whether or not people are still switched on from the election just a couple of months ago, or if there's a lot of undecideds in that as it results in the 53-47. And the other thing that'll be important is if Newspoll have changed the way that they do the polls to try and better reflect what the electorate's thinking, because there was a lot of conversation post the election about why were all these polls wrong? And were they wrong, or was there a lot of undecided votes or people hiding their vote? So it'd be good to see whether or not they've changed those elements of it. But certainly Scott Morrison has hit the ground running and got a lot of positives, improving or making those amendments to the taxes so that people are getting more money in their back pockets, and talking about border protection issues, which Australians are very mindful of.
Well, it's this thing too, and Christy, I'm very wary here, and it feels a little bit like we're eating chicken nuggets just after buying a brand new car. We've all tried to keep that new car smell for a while, trying not to sully it up with tea leaf reading. But again, and the reason I was sort of slightly askew on reading this out and a little odd when there was an apparently 11-point difference in primary. I was reading this literally as we were coming back from the break. 44% is the primary vote for the LNP, 33% is the vote for Labor, so only a third of the electorate, nowhere near what you would need to get to half. I think this is, look, springing the step for the government. The government gets to walk back into the parliament tomorrow going, not only did we win, been reaffirmed, wasn't a fluke, all the rest of it here, and we all know that. But I think there is an endless lesson here for Labor, the fact that they have not moved at all since the election, in fact gone slightly backwards. I think Albo has done a surprisingly bad job in the first few weeks. I expected him to be a bit smarter, to simply say, I'm the new broom, everything we used to believe in we don't. Now every single policy, flush it, get rid of it, get the domestos, get the brush out, we'll do it again, flush again, we'll call the clean plumber, they can clean out the pipes. Yeah, everything's back to zero, right? Blank piece of paper. But we've seen fights about the tax cut bill, a lot of Labor not learning its lesson, those terrible people that they've decided to put into the front line, including Shorten's attack puppy, KK, on the TV all day, every day. Part of learning the lesson of an election, and they all would have been lined up around the block there in Canberra to say if the Liberals had lost, you've got to not just change, you've got to change everything. Yet Labor has changed virtually nothing apart from, yes, a leader, but most of the same shadow cabinet and most of the same crap ideas.
He's been Albo and the leadership team, apart from people like Christina and Ed Husick, who seem to be the appointed Labor spokespeople to run on issues. Albo himself seems to have taken a back seat and been very, very quiet. That's because the government's been quiet. So for the first time in a long time, the public is able to not be bombarded with noise and the ebb and flow every 2 minutes. And we haven't seen this political tactic, but a government leading this way and an opposition following in lockstep for quite a long time. Albo has been wedged good and proper, as you say, on the tax cuts. We won't do it, we won't do it. Oh, yeah, we will. The drought funding was an absolute wedge. That's a base issue for the coalition, particularly how the coalition performed in regional and outer suburban areas at the election. The Hunter, Fitzgibbon's electorate almost going across to One Nation. So that was a very good wedge by the coalition to Labor, and they didn't say anything about it at all because they know they couldn't. They're being very quiet on a lot of their own core issues. So very confused as to whether they try and run the coalition or whether they try and retreat back to issues that are core to their base. It's quite fascinating at the current time.
Well, look, again, we're not going to bombard you. We will not bore you with these things in the next little while, apart from to say not just a bounce, but a surge for the government. And I think we all know that because Australia, well, we all know, one hell of a sigh of relief.